The topic of this presentation is vaping and e-cigarettes. Before we start, I would like to go over the statement of acknowledgement of traditional land. We wish to acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit River. Today, this meeting place is still home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. So this is a rough outline of the topics that we'll be discussing today in this presentation. We'll talk about the structure and mechanisms of vaping, health risks associated with vaping, laws and regulations surrounding vape, social aspects of vaping, vaping in relation to the COVID-19 pandemic, tips on how to manage vaping during the pandemic, and resources for support. Before we move further, it's important to note that through this presentation, we are not saying that you shouldn't vape, we are simply providing factual information so that you can make informed decisions. Vaping has become more prevalent in recent years, especially among youth. In fact, according to a 2019 Statistics Canada survey, over 1/3 of youth aged 15 to 19 have reported trying vape at some point in their lives. Take a few moments now to reflect on the following question. In what places have you encountered vaping in your everyday lives? So let's start with the question, what is vaping? Vaping is the act of inhaling and exhaling an aerosol produced by a vaping product. An aerosol is basically a suspension of small solid particles or liquid droplets in the air. And the term vaping product is very general because these products are known by many different names, such as the ones listed here, like e-cigarettes, vape pens, tanks, and mods. So how does vaping work? So regardless of the many different names of vaping products, they all generally work in the same way and have the same basic components. These include a mouthpiece, a chamber or tank to contain a liquid solution, a heating element, and a battery. The battery powers the heating element, which then heats the liquid solution, causing it to turn into a vapor. This vapor then condenses into an aerosol, which is then inhaled by the user through the mouthpiece. And then the exhalation of this aerosol produces the characteristic vape cloud that we associate with vaping. An interesting point is that despite the word vaping, it is actually an aerosol that is produced and inhaled rather than a vapor. In fact, a very common myth surrounding vaping is that it's just harmless water vapor that the person is breathing in and out, which, as we'll show later on, is very untrue. The list of different vaping devices is very extensive. They are available in many different shapes, sizes, and configurations. Most of them are designed to be very sleek in appearance while also mimicking the look of everyday objects such as pens and USB drives. Vaping devices can be either open, which means that the liquid solution can be refilled once it runs out, or they can be closed, which means that either the whole product or that part that contains the solution must be replaced. Vaping liquids are sometimes referred to as e-juice or vape juice, as you can see in the diagram on the top right. Whatever you call it, most of these liquids are a mixture of many different ingredients, one of them being nicotine, which we'll talk about in more detail later on. In addition to nicotine, certain flavoring chemicals, whether artificial or natural, are dissolved in a mixture of propylene glycol and or vegetable glycerin, which acts as the primary base of the solution. The types of flavoring chemicals added give rise to the many different flavors of vape that you can find on sale, many of which are fruit flavored, as you can see in the picture on the bottom right. These flavors play a big role in attracting young people to vaping products, including our age group of university students, leading to the substantial rise in youth vaping seen in recent years. According to the CDC, a study from 2013-2014 showed that most youth who use e-cigarettes first start with the flavored variety, and that flavors are the primary reason why youth report using e-cigarettes. It's important to be aware of the different advertising and marketing strategies that vape companies employ in order to attract youth to vaping. While most vaping liquids do contain nicotine, the amount of it can vary between different products, with some having very low amounts and others having more nicotine than a traditional tobacco cigarette. Speaking of cigarettes, let's talk about how vaping compares to traditional tobacco smoking. Vaping is often promoted by vape companies as a safe and healthier alternative to smoking, but this claim only shows half the picture. While it is true that vaping is less harmful than smoking, it still isn't without risk, and therefore shouldn't be termed as safe by any means. With that said, compared to traditional cigarettes, vaping products typically contain far fewer toxic and carcinogenic chemicals since they don't involve the burning of tobacco. In fact, according to the Government of Canada, completely switching from smoking to vaping can even lead to short-term general health improvements since it reduces exposure to harmful chemicals found in tobacco smoke. For these reasons, many vaping products are also marketed as an aid to help quit smoking, but the effectiveness of e-cigarettes as a cessation aid for smokers is still unclear as evidence is still emerging. Like I said before, vaping is not without risk, and now we'll discuss some of the different health risks associated with it. The first of these is regarding nicotine, which is the primary drug in both vaping products and cigarettes. Nicotine is a highly addictive substance and could lead to dependence, which is characterized by physical and psychological compulsions to take the drug and suffering withdrawal symptoms if the drug is not taken. We will talk about some of these withdrawal symptoms later on. Children and youth are especially sensitive to the effects of nicotine as their brains are still developing and will continue to develop until about age 25, which could make them dependent on nicotine with lower levels of exposure than adults. Nicotine can affect several cognitive functions such as memory, attention, mood, and impulse control. Nicotine also stimulates the release of various different neurotransmitters, one of which is dopamine, that is involved in the brain's reward system and induces feelings of happiness and satisfaction. Dopamine therefore plays a big role in the addictive nature of nicotine and other drugs. As a last point, vaping liquid containing nicotine is poisonous to both children and adults if swallowed or absorbed through the eyes or skin. Aside from nicotine, e-cigarette aerosols can contain harmful and potentially harmful substances, including ultrafine particles that can be inhaled deep into the lungs, heavy metals such as nickel, tin, and lead, flavoring chemicals, volatile organic compounds, and carcinogenic or cancer-causing chemicals. In addition, the heating of vaping liquids can create new chemicals such as formaldehydes. Some of these chemicals and contaminants have been linked to negative health effects. However, the long-term health impacts of inhaling these chemicals are still unknown and continue to be assessed. One of the lesser known risks of vaping is that of developing popcorn lung, which is the common term for the medical condition bronchiolitis obliterans. This is a chronic respiratory disease that damages the small airways of the lungs, as you can see in the image on the top right. The common symptoms of this disease are cough and shortness of breath. It is associated with exposure to flavoring chemicals such as diacetyl, which is used to give butter-like flavors to food products as well as vaping products. In fact, the disease is named popcorn lung because workers in popcorn plants developed it after inhaling heated flavors such as diacetyl. Although this chemical is present in some vaping products, there have been no reports of popcorn lung occurring due to vaping, according to the Government of Canada. Secondhand vapor is the exposure of exhaled vapor from users to bystanders. While it's not harmless, it does contain less chemicals than secondhand smoke from a cigarette. As a result, the health risks to bystanders are expected to be much lower compared to smoke from a tobacco product, according to the Government of Canada. However, since the specific health effects of exposure to secondhand vapor are still unknown, the government recommends that users be cautious around bystanders, especially youth and children. The last health risk I want to discuss here is a relatively uncommon one, but it's still worth mentioning. This is the risk of defective batteries or defective vaping products that have caused some fires and explosions, a few of which have resulted in serious injuries, according to the CDC. Lithium-ion batteries and vaping devices can pose a hazard if they are not properly used, stored, carried, or charged. According to the Government of Canada, some tips to prevent injuries from batteries and vaping devices is to avoid modifying your device, buy batteries from trusted source, and keep lithium-ion batteries away from metal objects.
All right, so now that we've gone through the health effects, let's talk about where we can purchase vape in our daily lives. Typically, vape can be purchased at locations ranging from convenience stores to actual vape trucks. A picture of a vape truck is actually shown to the right in the bottom right corner. Furthermore, there are specialty vape shops and cannabis retail stores. In the case of Ontario, individuals must be at least 19 years old to enter those two types of stores. I will discuss the regulation behind this age restriction later on. In addition, vaping products can be found at some gas stations. It is important to note that some locations may sell a wider variety of vaping products or flavors than others. Now let's talk about the regulations and laws that are associated with vaping. There are four main vaping regulations established at a federal level, and they are the Tobacco and Vaping Products Act, Canada Consumer Product Safety Act, the Food and Drugs Act, and the Non-Smokers Health Act. All of these regulations have the common goal of minimizing harm from vaping products and, on the other hand, maximizing public safety. These are obviously not the only regulations in place. There are several other complementary provincial specific regulations. Let's start off with the Tobacco and Vaping Products Act. It's been active for about 2.5 years. Its primary purpose was to protect all Canadians from the dangerous addictive capacities of nicotine and to also prevent youth appeal for tobacco and vaping use, which is very important since youth vaping has been rising in frequency lately. This act states that any vaping products or advertisements can't be sold. It also states that an individual must be at least 18 years old to purchase a vaping product. The Canada Consumer Product Safety Act and the Food and Drugs Act are similar such that they both allow thorough inspection and quality assurance of vaping products. The main difference is that the Canada Consumer Product Safety Act addresses vaping products that have made health claims, such as enhanced sensory experiences, or another common one is that e cigarettes are a much better and healthier way to quit smoking. And on the other hand, the Food and Drugs Act addresses vaping products that haven't made any health claims. Moving on to the Non-Smokers Health Act. Its primary goal is to protect individuals from secondhand smoke and secondhand vapor. It attempts to achieve this by preventing vape and smoking in many outdoor public spaces and all federally regulated locations such as banks, ferries, government offices, airports, and commercial airplanes. One example of an outdoor public space is actually the grounds of an educational institution or facility such as the University of Toronto. In fact, the University of Toronto has a smoke-free policy that they developed in late 2018 that states that all smoking and vaping is prohibited on university grounds, excluding the designated smoking areas. You must be wondering what the vaping situation is like in Ontario. Well, there have recently been modifications made to provincial regulations. Our health minister, Christine Elliott, has established that as of July 1st, all indoor displays that are visible from the outside are prohibited in specialty vape stores and cannabis retail stores. Furthermore, vaping products that have more than 20 milligrams of nicotine are only available in specialty vape stores, and majority of flavors are no longer available at locations like convenience stores, and gas stations. One provincial specific act is the Smoke Free Ontario Act, established in 2017, which strictly regulates where vaping is allowed. For example, an individual would get charged and fined if they vape in enclosed workplaces or enclosed public spaces. Also, an individual must be at least 19 years old to purchase a vaping product in Ontario, which contrasts with federal regulations. Before starting, just a short disclaimer that we're not saying it's good or bad to vape. These are just your first thoughts, associations, or stereotypes you may have about vaping. So now take some time to reflect. When you think of vaping from a social standpoint, what comes to mind? You must be wondering what I mean by the dangerous social aspect of vaping. Well, two professors at the University of British Columbia led a research study called Tactics for Drawing Youth to Vaping, Content Analysis of Electronic Cigarette Advertisements. They conducted a thorough investigation of the different marketing and media strategies vape companies use to appeal to youth. They performed a scoping review on 38 e-cigarette advertisements from 11 popular brands and discovered that about 53% of them included social life influences. The results show the multidimensional influences on youth vaping use. This has huge implications because vaping regulations can be modified to prevent the use of advertising strategies that were instrumental in the youth appeal. Now let's talk about a recent finding by Tammy Chang, a researcher at the University of Michigan Medical School, who led a research study called Youth Perceptions of Juuls in the United States. It was a text message based survey conducted on individuals aged 14 to 24 years old. It had some very shocking results. A whopping 66% of the respondents claimed that social factors motivated them to use vape. What makes this scary is that puberty is a very sensitive period when teens are trying to find their social identity and how they could fit in. If social factors have such a large influence on youth vaping, the numbers will only increase. Another finding was that 79% of them claimed they understood the health risks associated with juuling but used it anyways. This goes to show that social factors have a greater influence on teens' motivations than perceived health risks. Despite the fact this is just one research study, these results are extremely alarming. If you want to learn more about research on the vaping and e-cigarette in Ontario particularly, the facility and an excellent resource. Their website is otru.org. They have done extensive research and have numerous publications in this area. For example, in 2020, they've published pieces on marketing policies, flavor policies, and e-cigarette dependence policies, just to name a few. In fact, their executive director and principal investigator is a U of T professor named Dr. Robert Schwartz. He is an absolutely brilliant individual. He is also a senior scientist at CAMH for mental health policy research and a part of the faculty at the Dalla Lana School of Public Health. Now, think about your perspective, so take some time to reflect. What do you think influences people to vape? Also, in your opinion, do social factors play a large role in why people choose to vape, or are there other major reasons? As you may all know, there is a global pandemic currently, and the COVID-19 virus is taking a toll on everyone, whether that be physically, emotionally, or mentally. During such a sensitive and tough period, You must be wondering how vaping will affect you in relation with COVID-19. Well, according to CAMH, there actually is no direct evidence that vaping can increase your susceptibility to COVID-19. However, it is still important to be informed about how to manage your health during this pandemic. Let's talk about this association from a physiological perspective. We do have empirical evidence of ingredients in e-cigarettes and vape damaging one's lung and harming their immune system. For example, nicotine has immunosuppressive properties that can prevent the activity of NK cells and T cells, which help destroy foreign pathogens and viruses. A suppressed immune system means that if a user contracts COVID-19, they may be susceptible to harsher symptoms and increased lung damage. However, this is still a new area and there is not enough research done to make valid conclusions. I did mention nicotine in the last slide, so let's talk about different withdrawal symptoms. One can experience headaches. While writing something, you may feel shaky. You may have difficulty focusing on your lectures and maybe even have trouble sleeping. Furthermore, spontaneous cravings are possible and you may feel down, have an increased appetite, and feel anxious. When it comes to managing those spontaneous cravings during the pandemic, one of the most important things is to keep yourself occupied with any hobby or activity that you enjoy, such as exercise, reading, watching TV, cooking, yoga, or even art. Also, it is important to keep yourself hydrated and keep your mouth and hands busy. Furthermore, try and delay vaping as much as possible so that cravings can alleviate. Deep breathing can help you relax and reduce stress. Now let's talk about if you want to quit smoking. Cold turkey refers to quitting all at once, and obviously that is not the best method for everyone. Everyone's body reacts to sudden changes differently. Therefore, it is important to find someone who you can trust and can share your experience with, such as close friends, family, nurses, or even doctors. The counselors at the Health and Wellness Center are also available to help. A safer plan of action is to create a systematic plan and gradually stop. In addition, counseling and support groups are always welcome to help. Also, you can talk to a medical professional because there are over the counter products and medications that can help make the process easier for you. There are a variety of excellent resources out there which you can use for support. There is the UTSC Health and Wellness Center, which you can reach out to by phone number or by email. There is the Smokers Helpline, which is essentially a free service that offers support and information about quitting smoking. They provide online support on their website. And then there is the UFT My SSP, which stands for My Student Support Program. It provides students with real-time support and or appointment-based confidential 24-hour support for any school, health, or general life concern at no cost to you. They also have an app which you can download on your phone. There is Connex Ontario, which provide free and confidential services for people experiencing issues with addictions and mental health. You could call them or access their website. Lastly, there is the CAMH Nicotine Dependent Service, which is an excellent resource for quitting smoking. You could access it on their website. This brings us to the end of our wellness talk. Thank you so much to everyone for your time and attention.